everybody, it's Jen Budd, former senior patrol agent with the United States Border Patrol, immigrant rights activist. I talk about the truth of the Border Patrol and how it is that we got to this really fucked up situation. Today I want to talk to you about, I've already done this as a written piece, but I want to do it as a video. I think it's easier for people to understand. A lot of times, some people learn differently. And I think it's just, it's easier it's kind of just a different way to present this. This was originally titled Judges Across Southern Border Are Letting Adjudicated Violent Border Patrol Agents Loose in Our Communities. So if you want to go read that, you can find that on my Substack blog. There's a lot of ways that Border Patrol agents end up getting away with their crimes, whether the victims are migrants and they deport them and they're never found or they can't file complaints, whether the victims are their own family and they're pressured not to file charges because they love the agent and they need the agents to keep their jobs so that they can provide for their families and so forth, whether it is that uh, the agents harass the victims to the point of which they drop the charges or that kind of stuff. There's lots of ways that agents get away with this, but this is a different and unique way with what the agents are getting away with. And it's gradually, you could see it if you study the culture, you could see it gradually that more and more these judges are letting these agents get away with crimes and they're continuing to be agents, or they end up going to dispatch or something else and they get off scot-free with just probation. I mean, crimes like child molestation, they're getting away with. So this is how that is happening. And I have seen that at least from San Diego to El Centro, and I have seen this in Arizona. It is more difficult to see this in Texas because Texas is really good about hiding their records on criminal cops, let's put it that way. But I have three cases: San Diego, El Centro, and Tucson. Okay. So in general, um, they have all these ways to get away with this stuff, and it's just not enough. They're going to do even more. Um, it's not enough that they've been running secret cover-up teams since 1984 to get rid of the evidence of their crimes. It's not even enough that few will believe the victims, but the crimes that these agents are committing are horrible, horrible crimes. And they feel they should be able to get away with it. And the agency feels they should be able to get away with it. And you'll see this by what these judges say to the agents and how they're doing this. You'll see that this is the case, that they feel that the agents are above their victims. This is what's happening here. So I can't tell you when exactly this started. I can't tell you who started it or how it happened because I don't have enough access or money to see all the records. But essentially, it appears like, at least like I said, I can tell from San Diego to Tucson, Arizona, this is what's going on. And I would imagine it goes all the way to Corpus Christi as well, and probably even the northern sectors, quite honestly. I think this is a national thing. This is, it just continues with cops getting away with shit that they've gotten away with since the beginning of time, quite frankly. Quite frankly. But I would say that the Border Patrol is really good at covering its criminal agents. Let me put it that way. And I don't think that this is just a Border Patrol issue. I think this is extending to police from all areas, state and local, that we see this. It's just that I'm simply mostly focused on the Border Patrol, and these are the trials that I have actually witnessed. So essentially, based on my studies, it is rare for an agent to be brought to trial. In the agency's entire career since 1924, so that's 101 years, no Border Patrol agent has ever been convicted of killing a migrant on duty. And that is just implausible. It's just implausible, especially knowing with the amount of corrupt and criminal agents that they hire. Um, the juries tend to be extremely prejudiced quite often down here, especially when the defendant is somebody who has a badge and a gun. Um, and the agency and the courts will typically allow their fellow agents to fill the courtroom and intimidate witnesses, intimidate victims, and also, quite honestly, intimidate judges and juries. It's done on purpose. And the thought that that's not what they're doing is absolutely ridiculous. And I will say that often what I'm seeing nowadays is judges make comments like, wow, you were such a hero and all this other stuff. And it just like, and they just can't seem to understand that these agents are committing these horrific acts. And a lot of times you get the feeling when you sit and watch these judges, um, like Matsky is one case I'm going to talk about. Matsky, the judge just seemed to be like, it just really felt sorry for him. Like the victim forced him to pull his gun and put it in his mouth and threaten himself and then point it at his girlfriend and threaten her. You, we'll get to it. It's just amazing. So, but when these judges do this, what they're doing is they're ignoring the actual history of the agency. The history of the agency is rampant with brutality, criminality, sexual assaults, violence, beatings, all sorts of things. Even tying a migrant, handcuffing a migrant to something and then throwing them in the river. That's how bad. That case is not going to be in this one, but it can be really bad. I first started writing about the high number of criminal agents. I knew anecdotally as an agent that this existed. It's one of the reasons why I left. And I talk about in my book how I get to a point where in muster, which is the meeting before you go to the field and they tell you what's going on out there and what you need to know. I get to a point where I realize that the agents around me in green, I can point and go, oh, I know that one's on charge for rape charges. That one's this. The people that are sitting with me wearing the same uniform I'm wearing are more criminal than the migrants I'm catching every night. And the migrants, quite frankly, treated me better than a lot of the agents did. They never raped me. That's true. So I started writing about this during the first Trump administration under Carla Provost was the chief. And the media at the time was mostly focused on child separation. And I would think that because the public was really angry about child separation, we were seeing actually they were writing a fair amount about criminal agents and reporting on it. Like I said in my last video, only about number one, the number of crimes committed by Border Patrol agents is heavily underreported. CBP relies on them to report themselves. And then you also have crimes like in some states, like in Arizona, if the victim is a child, they will hide it from the media. There's actually a law that requires them to hide it from the media. So we truly have no idea how many agents are walking out around out there with convictions and still wearing the uniform. The Border Patrol knows, but they won't tell us. So they'll say, oh, that's privacy. And then when that agent ends up getting in real bad trouble, then they'll be like, oh, I'm sorry, we can't give you those records. See how that works? And once I started writing about the criminal agents, obviously the agency was going to realize that I was doing this. And so I expected the agency, knowing the Border Patrol, I expected management to ask local police officers, especially on the southern border, to keep their arrest of their agents quiet. And that's how it happens most of the time. They do not put their cases in the databases like they're supposed to. That's another way they hide it. So it did not take long for my sources on the border to say, yeah, uh, I've had people say, DPS Texas, state troopers, telling them, yeah, we've been trying to hide all the arrested Border Patrol agents so the media doesn't get a hold of it. And that's done throughout the border. And then also you have the judges and the um, court staff engaging in that also. Like I said, in Arizona, if it's a child sexual assault, they've managed to make a law under the guise of protecting the children. That somehow they can't talk about these pedophiles. I mean, really, it's it does a huge disservice to the community to hide these cases. Let me put it that way. But agents are still being arrested at a high rate. Quartz Magazine did an article in the first Trump administration citing that Border Patrol agents are arrested 5 times more than other police departments. And the Border Patrol will say, well, our arrest rates are under 1% of our staff every year. That's the goal. That's considered to be like acceptable. That's what other law enforcement agencies consider to be acceptable. And yet Border Patrol, so they're only showing you up to around 1%. They're not going to report more than that because then it would be deemed to be too much. So they just only report enough to be up to 1%. And at the same time, while they're sitting there telling you, but yeah, everybody has criminal elements within their groups. It's true. It's true. And it's less than 1%. So, like I said, we know that that's an undercount. So that's a problem. But then also, when you look at migrants and their arrest rates, and I've talked about this in the last video, that since 2018, Border Patrol agents as a population commit more violent crimes than the migrants they arrest every year. And the Border Patrol had to start adding to the crimes that they were listing as migrants with prior criminal convictions. They had to add very minor crimes, and they also had to add the crime of 1325, which is illegal entry without inspection, EWI, 8 USC 1325, in order to get it to look like the migrants were creating more crimes than the agents. So since 2018, and they're pretty close, they're right in there at 1%. But like I said, the Border Patrol's lying about how many agents. So they're like this, they're pretty even. But what it was before is if you add in these illegal entry without inspection, something that Border Patrol agents can't be charged with, they then end up making the migrants that they're catching look like they're more criminal than their agents, and that was the goal. So that's the way they manipulate the statistics. But if you take out and you just compare sexual crimes, drug crimes, threats, violence, and the Border Patrol agents as a population are committing more crimes. But all this stuff that they've done over the years to protect agents, that was not enough manipulation. So now the courts are involved. Now judges are involved to help keep these things secret. And so this is a breakdown of how that happens and how these judges are putting our communities at risk. So the first person I have here is Campo Border Patrol Agent Grayling Orve Williams. He's an agent out of my old station, Campo Station, although it's now, I think they call it El Campo, and it's up on the interstate. It's mostly a checkpoint station. He went down to the corner store, and after arguing with his girlfriend one day, this was within the last 5 years, he returned and claimed he heard a gunshot. He said that she had taken one of his personal guns, not his duty gun, and committed suicide. The San Diego sheriffs conducted the investigation, and according to the family's testimony, was told that the autopsy of their loved one had been completed and that they could go ahead with plans for cremation. The family began to question the investigation only after the cremation, when the medical examiner stated to them that there had been no autopsy because the investigators did not order one. So the sheriff detectives, homicide detectives, tell her, oh, yeah, we did it. Don't worry about it. But they didn't. And so all the evidence has been destroyed. It's important to note that the sheriff's office out there in Campo works hand in hand, excuse me, works hand in hand with the Border Patrol out there. The sheriff's station is in Pine Valley, right around the corner from the checkpoint. They all work together. And there were several domestic violence calls that the sheriffs always talked the victim, who is now deceased, out of filing charges because didn't she need him to keep his job in order to help take care of her children? So you should know it's illegal in California to not lock up your gun and your ammunition. You have to lock up both. And it is actually the ammunition charge that carries the heaviest sentence and requires the defendant to lose their gun rights for 10 years. So this would have been prevented if he had followed the law. But he did not follow the law. The failure to lock up his guns would have ended up in probation versus losing your right to possess a weapon for 10 years. So the failure to lock up the gun is actually less severe than the locking up of the ammunition in California. I told the family, so the family contacted me at the time because they knew something was wrong. And they said that the prosecutors, the district attorney, San Diego district attorney, was really nice and great. And I said, yeah, they're always really nice and great, and they act like they're there for you. But what you have to understand is that prosecutors and district attorneys are law enforcement officers. That's why they call Kamala Harris a cop. They are law enforcement, and they work really tight with law enforcement. And I said to them that the chances were pretty good that the prosecutors are going to drop the more serious ammunition charge and allow Agent Williams to keep his job. And they were like, oh, I can't believe that. And I said, well, just do me a favor. Just do me a favor and send them an email and let them know, and the family knows that I'm not an attorney. I'm not an attorney, but I said, this is how this usually goes. So just send the district attorney a letter and state that you would like them to charge the ammunition charge. And that is not simply based on my experiences in agent, although it is a lot, and experiences is researching this and going and sitting in the courtrooms and watching how this is done. I've spent a lot of hours doing that. But it's also based in the fact that Agent Williams had 2 previous domestic violence charges that resulted in domestic violence prevention education classes instead of jail time. And he managed to still remain a Border Patrol agent and then later on, years later, get into trouble with this. And I'll put up the cases here. We had 3 different charges, one in 2010, one in 2011, and one in 2012. Those are all from San Diego Superior Court. So when they assign agents to complete domestic violence prevention, alcohol and drug prevention, or like anger management classes, that's the court's preferred method for keeping criminal agents in uniform. Postponing hearings and dragging out the victims through the years of extensions is not just used by agents and their attorneys to wear down the victim's desire for justice, but it is also used to create the conditions wherein the agents can perform for the judges. So while court-appointed victims advocates who are paid by the prosecutors tell the families that they don't have to appear for every little status hearing, what the court is actually doing in those status hearings, and the victims tend not to show up because they don't want to expose themselves to any more trauma, what the court is actually doing is monitoring the agent's progress of their classes. If the agents can stay out of trouble and complete these classes, most judges will let the agents off with no time served or perhaps a small fine, if anything. It is common for these records to then either be sealed or simply removed from record as part of a plea deal. And so the question becomes, do judges do this for people who are not cops? Yeah, but not when the crimes are horrifically violent like this. These cases that I'm showing you are horrifically violent, should have been investigated more thoroughly, should have led to a trial and did not. Judges can often be lenient for minor violations, for first-time offenses. It's true. This is not a first-time offense. This is for a police officer. A woman is dead, and this is the best they can come up with. The investigation was covered up. They didn't do an investigation. So the level of violence that's displayed by these agents and that is known in their histories does not seem to matter to these judges at all, or to the prosecutors. Agent Williams' girlfriend was dead, and she left behind 2 children and a grieving family. She committed suicide with his personal gun and ammunition, which is a direct violation of the law. No doubt about it. This was not locked up. And when the family asked what they could do to ensure that the attorney's office did not drop the ammunition, that's when I suggested you write to them and demand that the charge, if you drop anything, drop the gun charge. Don't drop the ammunition charge, because we do not want this agent to have a gun ever again. The response from the district attorney was immediate, and they said, "Are you working with a lawyer?" And then they stopped talking to the family and became somewhat belligerent. Okay. So now the family's worried that what I'm saying is true is going to happen. What I said is going to happen is going to happen. They always claim to be representing the victims, to care about the victims publicly. You'll hear this all the time. But over and over and over again, you find out that prosecutors, district attorneys, U.S. attorneys are having private conversations with the defendants and their attorneys about what's the best way to get these agents off and keep them in uniform. And I'm saying that the victims' advocates are often well-intended, but let's be honest, their loyalty is to the prosecutors because they're the ones who pay them. So the communications between the family and the assistant district attorney broke down after that email was sent. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, sentencing happened. And the family's like, wait, we haven't even been talking about what's the plea deal. We have no idea. And they just announced the sentencing. So unbeknownst to the family, they offered the defendant the plea and they dropped the ammunition charge, but they would not tell the family that it was the ammunition charge that was dropped. And as this case is occurring, it happens to be during COVID. And so I watched the live stream as it was happening. And I'll show you a picture of the judge who did it. Just before the hearing had started, what happened, and I warned the family, this is going to happen. And they were like, oh, I don't know if it's going to happen, but you've been right so far. I watched it as they did it. Just before the hearing, when the family notified me what was happening, I told them to make sure that they write down their statement and demand that the judge allow them to read for the record their statement. And that's what they did. So the judge's name is Melinda J. Lassiter. She entered the courtroom, and I realized they changed the judge because the last judge, the prior judge, was a male. Lassiter just happens to be a prior deputy district attorney for the San Diego office. She was in the 1970s. Now she's a judge. And then she was on the Superior Court bench in the 1990s. And right away, Judge Lassiter says that she knew nothing of the case, that she got called in the last minute to handle the sentencing, but that both the parties involved had reached a plea agreement. And it just so happens that they changed the prosecutor. So the assistant district attorney is now changed. So why would they do that? She stated that she was unsure what the agreement and what all was said with the family as well, but assured that she was assured from the previous assistant district attorney that everything was agreed upon by all parties, and that's not true. And the judge reiterated that for the point for the record that everything was agreed to, and so she was going to be okay with this, even though she had not heard the case and admitted that she didn't know anything about it. And that's when the family member stood up and demanded to be heard. And she told the court about the family's wishes that the charge of the ammunition charge not be dropped because of his history of domestic violence, which included the calls to the local deputies in the past where they defended Agent Williams and talked her sister into not filing charges. She also stated in court to the judge that the family was not included in any of the discussions of the plea, unlike what the new assistant district attorney was claiming. So Judge Lassiter stated that the family's statements were recorded and then proceeded to sentence Agent Williams to probation for the gun charge and drop the ammunition charge, just like I said they would. The thing that's most important about this that got to me the most is that the judge and the assistant district attorney never referred to the charges as the ammunition charge or the gun charge. Why? The only way that they referred to the charges were by their numbers. So charge number 6585D2, whatever it is, we're going to drop that one. We're going to go with charge 3754D65. Yeah, okay, yeah, we all agree. We're all good. The victim's family doesn't know what they're talking about. They don't know what those charge numbers are. So the family's left in the courtroom not even understanding what the fuck happened. And they actually came out and she talked to me and she goes, well, I think the charge for the ammunition charge is going to happen in a month or two. I said, sweetie, it's over. He got away with it. Agent Williams kept his job. And I know a lot more about Agent Williams, but I can't say because I can't prove it. But he's got quite a fucking history. All right, let's go to the next case. So this is still California, but we're going to go over to the Superior Court of California, Imperial County. Imperial County is the next county over for San Diego, so we're talking El Centro sector. So San Diego County is San Diego sector for Border Patrol. Imperial County encompasses basically everything from San Diego County to the California border with Arizona. Okay, so that's El Centro, Calexico, Imperial Valley. That's the desert, but also a lot of farmland because they have canals and stuff that provide water to the area. The prosecutors over here are doing the same thing with extremely violent Border Patrol agents. So in 2022, the president of the El Centro Border Patrol Sectors Union, Michael Matsky, he has a long history of abuse and violence that I cannot get into because I cannot tell you how I know that. But there's lots of documents, let me just say that. Even in the labor boards, let me give you a hint. In 2022, he was, at the time, he was the president well, he had been the president for quite a while of El Centro's Border Patrol sector, so the union in that Border Patrol sector. And he was one of those union stewards, as they call them. Most union stewards, you do it part-time when it's needed. He was one of those that got one of those cushy positions where it's 24/7. But he has a long history of this, but this comes around 2022. This was caught on video. I have the video. The victim has requested the video not be released because he got away with it. That's what she was always afraid of. I obviously, I tell the victims, I try not to deal with victims anymore. It's really hard on me. I thought I could do it. I can do it in this sense where I'm reading stuff and talking about this, I cannot do it. I cannot do it being next to the victims. They are going through a lot of trauma and it is difficult. And this case was really rough. Just really rough. Um, the victim just did not want to believe that justice was not going to come for her. Justice was not going to happen in her case. And she thought that she could control what they were doing. Um, and she learned that the hard way. So I have all this on video. The judges have seen all this on video. First, when she got the restraining orders against him, the judges would let them talk and go through the case, and then kind of okay, back and forth, and then they would hear Matsky's attorney say, "Well, she's just trying to get money, and she's trying to do this, portraying her out to be a money grubbing whore and all this other stuff." And that she just really loves Mike Matsky and she's jealous because he's moved on, kind of shit. And then you see the video. And then, so the judges will be like, and then they go, okay, now I'm going to look at the video. And they turn and they play the video on their desk and they're like, hmm. And then they take off their glasses and they turn and they go, okay, Mr. Matsky, you are not to have a weapon. You are to turn in all your weapons and this and this. So she got some good restraining orders against him for a while. And originally he was charged with two very serious violent felonies and 5 misdemeanors. Um, so he had some vandalism charges in there, but essentially what he did, they get into this fight, and the reason why it's on camera is because she has a camera outside her house. He's trying to find his gun. He cannot find his service weapon. He's drunk and he's pissed at her. He says he should have never dated a Latina because they're fucking crazy, is what he says. A little bit of racism thrown in there. And she's like, babe, your gun is in your car, in your truck. You put it in your console. And he's walking back and forth and yelling. And he finally finds his gun. It's his duty weapon. It's fully loaded. And just so you know, in the Border Patrol, we keep one in the chamber. I don't know if they have safeties on their guns. We did not have safeties on our guns back in the day because the thought was that you needed to be able to pull that trigger as fast as possible. So they didn't want safeties. But at any rate, he takes the gun and he puts it in his mouth. And he says, I want to fucking kill myself because you're so fucking crazy. And then he takes the gun out and he does that. And he says the same thing, that he wants to fucking kill her. Fortunately, he did not. So this is what caused all these problems. The court and the prosecutor allowed Border Patrol agent and Union President Michael Matsky and his attorney to drag the case out for several years. So this is another one of these tactics that they use. They wear the courts down. They wear the victims down. So by the end of it, the victim's just like, I need to move on. I need to get out of here. I need to do this. And a lot of times that's why they end up dropping the cases. They just need to move on. But essentially during that time and during those 2 years, as the judge is dragging this out and allowing this to drag out, Agent Matsky is ordered by the judge, Christopher Plourd, Plourd, and Assistant District Attorney Eric Alizade, Alizade, Alizade. They end up agreeing with each other without the victim being present because she does not want to see Mr. Matsky and go to all these things. And they tell her, oh, you don't have to be here, so she doesn't go. So like I'm saying, that's when they're making their deals, is when you're not there or when a family member's not there. And at the same time, you need to remember that during COVID, all these small little things, they, in these small courtrooms down here on the border, do not have the money to pay for a court reporter. So everything that is being done is not being recorded. Except for they will have the clerk just say, the judge decided this, the judge decided that. That's it. So we don't really know what goes on unless you go to these hearings. And I went to the majority of the Matsky hearings. But essentially, Judge Plourde and the assistant district attorney agreed that Agent Matsky should go to alcohol and anger management classes. And once he completed those classes, then the judge and the assistant district attorney agreed to throw out all the violent felony charges and instead charged him $100 for vandalism because he ripped her front door screen off in a rage. And even though Agent Matsky's crimes were clearly documented on that video, and even though the Border Patrol chief at that time, Chief Owens, issued a termination letter to the defendant stating that he believed Mike Matsky should be terminated because of his actions, regardless of if he beat the charges, he still kept his job. If you go to my blog, you can read more in depth about this. So he could be retired right now. I believe he only needed 3 more years to be retired. The next one I'm going to talk about is Border Patrol Agent Stephen Holmes. When Border Patrol agents are arrested for sexual crimes, judges along the southern border are more likely to let the agent out on bond than they are other defendants accused of the same level of sexual crimes. On May 21st, 2019, the Tucson sector, which I call the rapey sector, because they have the most, at least that we can find, the most charges, the agents charged with rape, and a lot of pedophiles too. In fact, even, I wouldn't call them gangs, but groups of pedophiles of agents who trade photographs and all that stuff. It's really bad. So on May 21st, 2019, the Tucson Sector Border Patrol agent Stephen Holmes was arrested for 3 counts of sexual assault and 3 counts of aggravated assault for strangulation of his victims. These alleged assaults occurred over a 7-year period starting in 2012. And even though the first victim reported her assault in 2012 to the Tucson police during the Holmes hiring process with the Border Patrol, the agency still hired him. 7 years later, he was arraigned in Pima County by Judge Kimberly Ortiz, a Republican, who originally set the bond at $25,000 cash only. That's considered a low bond for the type of violent sexual assaults he was doing, and especially when there's multiple victims involved. The defense attorney noted that Agent Holmes could not make, so his attorney says, oh, he can't make that bond. He can't do a cash-only bond. And so Judge Ortiz decided to change the bond so that Agent Holmes could return to working to the Border Patrol while wearing an ankle monitor. What? Because the thing is even if you're going to go and work for the Border Patrol and you don't have on your green uniform and they have you on administrative duty, a lot of times they put you in processing where there are victims for this guy. Come on. So he ends up, and this is during COVID, so remember that. So that's also why things are taking a while. It's not just that it's COVID. They do this all the time, but it helps them when this happens to then excuse it, oh, well, if COVID wasn't going on, or if we weren't overwhelmed, we'd get to it right away. So she changes the bond so he can get out and keep working. And he gets placed on administrative duties, and he is indicted on 14 counts by a grand jury while he's out working for the Border Patrol. And thanks to Judge Kimberly Ortiz changing her order and allowing him out on bond, he was then able to sexually assault and strangle another victim. That's the thing that was so different about Agent Holmes, is that he liked, these encounters were consensual at first, and then they become violent. And then as the victim resists, then he strangles them, gets off on the strangulation. Guy really loves that. And she knew this. She knew this. The judge, Kimberly Ortiz, she knew this at the time. She was looking at the documents and the reports. So He promptly got arrested again, and thankfully he had a different judge who did not allow him out on bond this time. For her part, Judge Kimberly Ortiz was then promoted by appointment under Governor Doug Ducey to the Superior Court of Arizona, Pima County in July of 2021, just 1 month before Agent Holmes reoffended while he was out on bond because of her actions. I say that so that you in Tucson perhaps start addressing these issues, okay? Judge Kimberly Ortiz. In 2022, he's finally convicted on 11 counts of sexual assault and domestic violence and strangulation. Although this case resulted in prison time, it is unknown how many victims he had. It is unknown how many other women he did this to, or if he did it to other women while he was out on bond, thanks to Judge Kimberly Ortiz. Had he not reoffended during that time, the chances are pretty decent that a judge would have let him go with lesser charges and maybe some domestic violence classes. All the victims had met Agent Holmes on a dating app, aside from one who worked with him at the Border Patrol. So it's another Border Patrol employee victim as well. And as it turned out, her case was lost in court because she was seen as a willing participant. So he's adjudicated as this horrible sexual predator who tries to strangulate his victims. And he apparently is charged with a crime against a Border Patrol employee, but somehow they decided in that case she was a willing participant. Okay, so that's another one. The most recent one is another one out of the same county, Pima County Superior Court. He let a high-ranking Border Patrol agent go with lifetime probation after he pleaded guilty to sexually assaulting two of his children. Border Patrol agent Efren Lopez Cordejo wasn't just any agent. He was a special operator for BORTAC. He was a deputy commander for BORTAC. BORTAC is Border Patrol's elite, like SEAL team. They're SWAT. They're the elite of the elite. They train all the time. You don't see fat BORTAC agents, okay? And these guys, like in the military, if you serve in those elite units, then you tend to get promoted to chief. And he was a deputy commander, so he's up there. But for 11 years in two different relationships, and the young girls, one was a stepdaughter, one was his daughter, and they started around 9 years of age. And for 11 years, he abused his own daughters. The girls did not know, so they happened at two separate times. He's in one relationship and he does it to one, and then he's in another relationship and he does it to the other. If you look at the blog on this, it'll have, I actually published the complaint and the testimony of the victims on there, so you can see what it is if you want to see that. I do want to warn you, it is very triggering. Once again, the court, the prosecutors, defense, and court staff, I say they conspired to keep his name out of the newspaper because it started in 2021 and we didn't know about it publicly until December of 2024. So about 4 years, it was kept quiet. Why is it? Well, the problem is Arizona has this law 123 that states that if a victim is a minor in a sexual crime, then you have to keep it quiet. So they've made it a law for them to keep the public unaware of who is being charged and convicted of pedophilia and crimes against children. It kind of seems like the antithesis of justice, the like, how are you protecting if you're hiding these people kind of thing, right? The agency, Border Patrol, and Pima County court system prevented Tucson area residents from knowing that an alleged repeat child molester was free in their neighborhood for nearly 4 years. Just, just fuck. He was allowed to travel during this time, uh, and he was free during this time. So the judge saw this as, and he even states, because you didn't reoffend during the 4 years. I mean, forget the 11 years, but you didn't reoffend during the 4 years. It's just the entire sentencing is on YouTube for Efren Cornejo, and you should watch it if you can tolerate it. It just this judge is just mind-boggling. His name is Casey McGinley. I've seen him do it before in a pedophilia case where he's let somebody off. And it's not just that he let Cornejo off with no jail time. It's that because there was a trial and it ended up in a hung jury because the charge that the prosecution charged him with was continuous sexual assault. It's a higher level. And the jury could not come to a decision on that because they felt that because he was molesting and exposing himself to one child during that relationship and then stopped when he went into the other relationship, that that somehow was not continuous. And so they end up in a hung jury, and instead of the prosecution maybe changing the type of charge it was and going at it from a different way, and I'm just going to say that sometimes I think they do this on purpose. They choose charges that are very difficult to prove instead of ones that would be more applicable to the situation. Um, and that trial was held in secret, away from the press and away from the public, leaving the jury hung, like I said. They then offer him a plea. And the plea they offer him is they will drop all 14 counts of child molestation and exposing his genitals to these children for 11 years, down to just two single counts, one of indecent exposure and one of child molestation. So it doesn't look like it's somebody who's a repeat offender and a longtime offender. It's going to look like on the court records that he only did this one time. It's just Judge Casey McGinley allowed many Border Patrol BORTAC agents to testify as to how they would allow Cornejo to be around their children and that he would not have done what he was in fact pleading guilty to. The victims and their families demanded the maximum 3 years in prison for just these two charges, when before, if he was on 14 counts, he would have been in jail for at least 20, 25 years. And they demanded that they at least be given the minimum for these piddly ass charges, right? And the two women are adults now. The reason why the two young girls are adults now, the reason why they came forward is because they realized some of the children in his family and the relationship that he's in now are about the age they were when they were assaulted, and they're worried. And they're like, 19, 20 now, and they're moms, young moms themselves. And they feel stronger and they feel that they need to do this. And they were in the sentencing begging, pleading, and crying with Judge McGinley to not let this man back out on the street. And he ignored them. And he literally said at one point that Cornejo was a hero and served his country, and that he wasn't there when these events happened, and he wasn't sure if the young women were telling the truth. Watch the sentencing. You're just going to be like, what? This guy should not be a judge, man. It's crazy. Judge McGinley noted in his sentencing that he would only be sentencing on the two charges, and so he just ignores the other ones as if they do not exist. So he's viewing this as one single mistake instead of the 11 years and the two victims that it actually was. Even when the court stated that the defendant must admit responsibility for his actions in order to get this plea deal, the defense refused to do so and stated that Cornejo was only pleading guilty because he did not, quote, want his family to suffer through another trial, unquote, which is odd because he didn't seem to care about the first trial. But now he's going to be a hero and save those girls and his family from more heartbreak. They are always the victims. Border Patrol agents are always the victims. They are never the aggressors. Okay. So Judge McGinley allowed the plea. He did not have to, but he allowed the plea, um, even with the refusal of Cornejo to accept responsibility, even though it's a requirement. So they're just making up their own decisions here and not even following what the law says. The court, meaning Judge Casey McGinley, continued on a long diatribe about how if the defendant offended again, he would find himself before the same judge, and then he would really be in trouble, young man. Go watch it. I'm not kidding you. He seriously says this kind of shit. So he accepts the plea. He threatens him like he's a little kid. And he literally stated that he believes letting an admitted pedophile go with lifetime probation and not having to register as a sex offender, he stated that he believed that then the community and the courts could keep a better track on him. What? He doesn't have to. So he has to report, I don't know, every month, every quarter, or whatever, and just basically say to his probation officer, I have not raped any children today. I have not exposed myself to any children today. Honor first, right? Honor first. In the judge's own words, in McGinley's own words, Justice McGinley's own words, Cornejo presented, quote, a dichotomy to the court. On the one hand, he was a hero to the nation for serving in an elite law enforcement group. On the other hand, he seemed like he was sexually assaulting children, according to the allegations. Judge McGinley admitted that all the education programs ordered by the court were completed by Cornejo. So see, once again, when the victims are in there, the judges and the prosecutors are making them go to these educational programs to work on themselves. And in the judge's view, he stated that that meant he would not reoffend again because he did everything he was ordered to by Judge McGinley. He was fined $3,000 for child molestation of one child and not a cent for the other. And so I guess that's the cost. Now, if you're a Border Patrol agent, you can sexually abuse your own children and you can rape them. And if you get Judge McGinley, as long as you got $3,000, you're good to go. That's how much it costs to do that if you're a law enforcement, I guess. So I would guess that that night he went to the bar with his BORTAC agents to celebrate. This is the system that exists for when, and I can only say Border Patrol agents, but I know it exists for other ones. But because I mostly focus on the Border Patrol, I will say this is the system for Border Patrol agents when they commit crimes in our local courts. And they drag these cases out for years. They have the agents do educational classes, alcohol, drug addiction, these things. They make them pay some fines. And then the prosecutors and the judges drop or lower the charges and give light sentences, if anything at all. This is what I would call a shadow legal system developed by the courts that requires cooperation from many actors, from many different actors, from different agencies and groups. It's not afforded to other defendants accused of the same crimes. Judges on the southern border seem to believe that they can just order violent agents to some educational classes, and that's good enough. They can just erase their cases or never put them in the databases. Or worse yet, they seal the cases so that no one ever knows the truth about these agents. But these cases are just the tip of the iceberg. In the rare instances when agents are held accountable, we, the public, never know the whole truth behind it. The Border Patrol refuses to release employee records of agents convicted of crimes, and for all we know, they molested, raped, assaulted, and strangled migrants every week they were in service. And we have no idea. So I think that when a lot of you write to me right now, you say, these agents in Los Angeles, they don't look like real Border Patrol agents. Border Patrol agents don't act like that. Yes, they do. They do. And I know that you have been fed a decade of videos of Border Patrol agents suspending themselves from helicopters with American flags, playing country songs. You have been assaulted with decades of Border Patrol agents going to save people who are victims of whitewater, flooding and stuff like that, fires and whatnot. That's propaganda. They wouldn't have to put up all that propaganda unless they were trying to hide something. You need to be very careful when you're around Border Patrol agents, not just because of the violence that they're bringing to their streets, that because of a lot of those agents who are willing to come to your cities and be violent like that, throw people on the ground, demand to see their papers, bust out their windows, rip them out through the doors, even though they're United States citizens. Does it make sense now? But essentially, what we did with the United States Border Patrol after 9/11 is we took a backward agency. We had revolvers, and we were just old school, old West kind of stuff when I got in. And then you gave them billions of dollars. And they already had really poor hiring standards. The agency is known among the federal agents as the butthole of the federal service. And the agents know this, but they're pretty heavily invested in this propaganda that they're honorable and this and that. It's not to say that there aren't honorable agents in the Border Patrol. I'm sure there are still. I would like to think I was. But the fact of the matter is that the system and the culture allow this. And the fact of the matter is that the government hides it. The government hides it. So every time you see, Border Patrol put out something where they're like, well, you got this sexual predator. I'm always happy when they catch somebody coming across the border. I don't want those people in our country. But I also don't want these Border Patrol agents who are sexual predators to have freedom and to be running around with badges and guns and acting as federal agents. The problem with the Border Patrol is not to say that every male agent is in there doing this kind of stuff. They're not. But there's the system to cover it up when it does happen, and it happens frequently enough. You have to understand that the people who join that agency, especially nowadays, especially after 9/11, I could say before 9/11, I didn't know, I had never even heard of the Border Patrol when I joined. It just wasn't a thing all across the country like it is now. And the internet was just getting started back then. So even if I had gone to research the Border Patrol, I'd have had to go to a college or a university and then sit there and read through newspaper after newspaper after newspaper. I would have never gotten a job. But I think the people today, they know a lot of what the Border Patrol is because they get a lot of publicity. But the problem is that the media is not reporting this stuff and tying it together. It feels like, the Tucson rape sector, it always feels like that's a one-off when they report these things. Sometimes they'll happen in clusters and they'll be like, oh, there's a problem. And then the Border Patrol gets the local police to stop reporting these things. And then they pass laws like Arizona 123 where they don't have to report anything. That's bullshit. I mean, come on. But next time you see the agents go, hey, we caught a sexual this guy was raping children and we kept him from getting into the country, and they cheer and they want congratulate them. Thank you. Thank you for doing that. And by the way, stop hiding your predators in the United States Border Patrol. The stories that the migrants tell you are not lies. I hate to tell you that. And it's been consistent in the last 25 years, 25 years before that. If they're raping their own female agents, what do you think they're doing to the migrants? What do you think some of these agents are doing to the children? And it is never addressed. Never. Congress refuses to hold committee hearings on it. I don't really want them to do it right now because we all know they would just shit all over it and do nothing with it anyhow. But I'm going to keep writing about it and I'm going to keep talking about it. So they're not heroes. We need to stop putting, I will say this, we need to stop putting law enforcement agents up on pedestals. And I mean, we've always done this in the United States. It's not like law enforcement has ever not been corrupt in the United States, quite frankly. But the level that it is right now, the reason why the courts are doing this more so than they have in the past is because they have a lot of pressure. The judiciary is a weak branch of government right now, just as the legislature is. And so you see this at the low levels, county courts and stuff. But then you see it also, like, as we look at the people who are being charged at the federal level, like all those people charged under Trump that then get pardoned or then get. So this is what you're seeing is a justice system that is so corrupt that it is letting off the law enforcement that brings them the cases that they need to keep going as a system. And you see your politicians are protecting and pardoning these agents who have been adjudicated to have committed horrible crimes. Why? Because they're depending on the law enforcement to protect them from us. So you see what they're doing? Law enforcement are the oppressors. They're there to protect the people with money, property, and power. They're not really there to protect us. If they were, they would go after their own agents, but they don't. And this is one of the reasons why the Border Patrol can't keep people in there. I mean, in 1995, I was in the class 288th. I just found out a couple of weeks ago, they're up over 1,250. That's with 65 to 70 uh, people in each class. That's like nearly 1,000 classes. And they can't manage to keep 20,000 people in the Border Patrol. For a lot of us women, it's because you got to be tough enough to survive that sexual assault and that rape if it happens to you in that way. That's why they call us the fierce 5%. It's because we're the 5% who have nowhere to go and need that job. So we have to take it. And let me tell you, you men who sit there and claim that women can't be in Navy SEALs and all this other stuff because they would have to handle sexual assaults and women can't do that because that would be part of like torture. You don't think that they sexually assault men when they're torturing them? Get the fuck out of here. They do. And to sit there and say that women can't handle sexual assault so they can't be Border Patrol, as Efren Cornejo proved, we are sexually assaulted by our own fathers. We are sexually assaulted by our own brothers, our cousins, our pastors, law enforcement officers, our mentors, on and on and on and on. Don't tell me we can't handle that. You just haven't talked to the women of the Border Patrol. You just haven't talked to the women of the Border Patrol. Women survive sexual assault throughout their entire lives, and they live with their sexual assaulters, and they have to work with their sexual assaulters. Get the fuck out of here with that. So I guess that's about all I have to say on this one. But I think I've done a couple of videos here in the last few days on that touch on rape culture or are about rape culture. And I would like to move off of that. So I feel like I've done all I want to do on that for a little while. And concentrate more on ice and other things like that. And so that's what I plan to do in the future. But thanks for watching. Consider subscribing. And if you can afford to chuck in a few bucks, I'd appreciate it. Or buy my book, Against the Wall. It's available anywhere. And if you don't like Amazon or Barnes and Noble, you can get it at Bookshop. If you don't like it on Audible, there is Recorded Books also has it there. And there's a sample of the first chapter on YouTube if you want to hear it. I read it, so you can get a sample of that. It's more my personal story of being an agent and how I got caught up in that um, and ended up in that agency and what happened. So, um, but when people read it, they're like, "Holy hell! Now I understand what's going on in LA," and you'll understand too. All right, talk to you later.